Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you. I haven't actually had a chance to join you via camera in a couple of weeks, so I'm excited to have everybody back together. We are going to get started, and first of all, I noticed forgive me, I'm just clearing my camera a little bit. It looks a little bit smudgy, but first of all, welcome back. I know we took a week off last week due to the Memorial Day holiday. Hopefully everybody was able to have a restful weekend. I know a lot has happened, obviously, and we're going to be getting into that. But I'm really excited to let you know that in addition to Mark Kuhar and Amanda Lowe as our guest presenters today, we also have a special treat with Melissa Sulkowski, who's going to be a guest contributor for today's session. So we'll be getting to that in a moment. And before we do that, I wanted to just give you a little bit of an idea in terms of what we're going to be covering today. So I do have an announcement that I'd like to share with you. We're going to be doing that. Then after the announcement, we're going to be introducing today's presenters, and then we're going to jump right into it. So the first half of our time together is going to be touching upon what Melissa is going to help contribute with. She and I will both be co-presenting for this particular portion, and that will be just how to stay ahead of the workplace impact with everything that's been happening. I can't believe how much has happened in just 2 weeks since the last time we were together. But again, for the issues that you see right there in front of you on the screen, we are going to be tackling this with you so that you can feel as prepared as possible. And then, of course, the final 30 minutes, we'll be spending time with Mark and Amanda, who will be sharing all sorts of very helpful insight in regards to your compliance, HR related questions. So that's what we're going to be doing today. As I always do, I want to make sure that I give my spiel, which is this. By no means am I an attorney. By no means is Aaron Phillips an attorney. Aaron and I both work together here at Decision Associates. We are partners in the human capital side of the business. Aaron actually is on a well-deserved vacation starting today with his family, so he will not be joining us as he often does to get us kicked off. But I just like to show you the perspective that we are coming from with the insights, the guidance, the support, and the information that we share with you during these weekly webinars. So once again, we are not attorneys. What we are seasoned human resource executives and organizational development executives. And you can see here the various industries and experience that he and I both have. Neither of us are medical professionals either. So while we are sharing information that we have related to COVID-19, none of it is coming from our purview of being medical professionals, because that we are not. However, we are doing the appropriate research. So if you have any specific questions related to a compliance issue, a legal issue, a medical issue, we definitely encourage you to contact a professional who is trained in that area, respective to certainly medically, respective to everything with COVID-19. And we often provide you with information on how to get in touch with those professionals. And of course, if you have a very unique legal issue or question, we are not attorneys. We can give you some general guidance, but we would encourage you to contact either Mark or Amanda. All right. So I've given my spiel that I always give. This is what I wanted to share with you as our announcement. So Friday, June 26th will be our final Ask HR webinar. And we've been talking a lot about this. We've been doing these webinars with you side by side since the first week of April. And we've noticed that you, and by you, I mean the employers that we are serving, we've noticed that you're starting to transition into a new stage where you're really beginning to understand the rules and how to apply them as it relates to the pandemic. And we have recognized through all of the calls and emails and dialogue that we have throughout the week with our clients and with all the good people who are Ask HR webinar participants, that you've really gotten to a point where there's a need for a deeper dive into much more specific meatier issues that are unique to your industry, your location, your organization, your circumstances, all of those good things. So we've been brainstorming, and we have two potential solutions that we're exploring. One solution, and it's not a this or that. It would be a this and that, just to be clear. So one potential solution would be, instead of having these big, huge Ask HR webinar groups, we would instead offer smaller webinars or smaller groups so we could have, ongoing deeper discussion, and we could dive more deeply into the issues that are unique to the people in that group who have common characteristics, such as maybe all nonprofit groups, maybe all manufacturing groups, maybe all healthcare groups. Do you see what I'm saying? So, we would, instead of having everybody lumped together, form smaller groups with organizations that have similar characteristics and therefore similar issues. And then another option would be to roll out a free 1-hour consultation for all past and present webinar registrants, so that we could help you explore any potential needs that you might have on a project basis. But we'll be very honest with you, and if we don't think that there is really a huge need for anything, we're certainly not gonna try to sell you something you don't need. But we just want to make sure that we are hitting it from an angle where everybody's getting what they need to get out of it. And I want you to know that your input is going to largely help us figure out what steps to take. And you'll be all receiving an online survey, a very brief online survey. We want you to weigh in, and we want you to help us actively work on what the next steps would be as we define those. So specific details will be coming, and we'll have those specific details ready to share with you on June 26th, which will be our final Ask HR webinar. I'm also very much eager to put my head together with, Mark and Amanda, who've been very valuable contributors, because we certainly want to find a way for them to continue contributing. I know all of you get so much out of them, but we want to make sure it's in a way that makes sense for everybody, and also gives you what it is that you want to get out of this. So that's the announcement that I wanted to share. Wanted to introduce you to today's featured guest contributor. Her name is Melissa Sulkowski. For those of you who have been in our webinars all along, I believe it was week 3. Let me see. Yes, I believe it was week 3. That would have been April 17th that Melissa actually presented on some issues related to COVID-19 and the emotional and psychological impact that it has had. So, that is something that I'm very much looking forward to having her weigh in on, in terms of the social, emotional issues that we're talking about as it relates to everything going on in just a few moments. So Melissa is going to be co-presenting with me. Melissa, did you want to say any words or say anything to the group?
Just thank you for the invite, and I appreciate just being able to kind of chime in and add what I know in terms of working with teams and people in general, and really just be a resource for anyone that might have any further questions. I would just invite you to feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, excellent. And Melissa, I have on the screen for everybody who's in this webinar to see a little bit about how they can contact you. So there's your email address, your website, your phone number, but I also have a few bullet points in regards to your background. And one of those bullet points, of course, is a consultant for local businesses. Could you speak a little bit as to, because you have a very unique background, could you speak just briefly as to your background and help the people on this webinar understand how they could make sense of all the good things you've done and how you possibly could work with them if they ever needed it?
Sure. So as you can probably see, I have my RN license and my license as a professional counselor. Most of my ongoing training for probably, I'm going to say, the last 15 years has been focused on interdisciplinary teams and helping teams function in healthier ways, whether that, and I guess I would call it more of a systems approach, whether that's a team for a business, whether that's a team or system of a family, or a family business for that matter, really being able to help people effectively communicate through differences, any points of conflict, and really create more proactive plans in how they can help, support one another in functioning to reach their their end goals and kind of line up around their values and missions. So it's really a focus on communication and lining systems up in a way that allows everyone within that system, or sort of, for lack of better words, underneath the leadership, thrive and have clear messages and a secure feeling in where they're at and where they're going.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you very much. That I know helps everybody quite a bit. So I'm going to keep your microphone on, Melissa, and we're going to, in just a moment, start teeing up for the topic that you're going to be helping to contribute with. All right. So I also, before we turned over to that, wanted to just show you a screenshot of the information related to Mark Kuhar, who is a Pennsylvania attorney based out of Erie. He is going to be our featured guest presenter, along with Amanda Lowe, who is a New York State based attorney. You'll be seeing her screenshot in just a moment. But as you can see Mark's areas of practice, his professional affiliations, his education, and of course, his contact information. I know a lot of you have been taking advantage of reaching out to Mark and contacting him in between these webinars. He's always happy to help and answer questions that you might not feel comfortable asking in a larger group such as this. And here is Amanda's information. Once again, you can see her education, the various practice areas that she practices within her firm, which is based out of Buffalo, New York. And you can certainly see her credentials. So very excited to have Amanda and Mark with us, and you'll be hearing quite a bit from them later for the second half of today's webinar. One thing I want to make sure everybody understands, because some of you are new to this weekly webinar format, Amanda and Mark will begin by answering the questions that were pre-submitted, and we have, I believe, 6 questions that were pre-submitted by those of you who registered. If you do think of additional questions throughout the course of today's webinar, at any point in time when the question pops into your mind, please type it into the chat or Q&A dialog box, and they will answer them live. I know that the last time we did this, they were both able to hang on. I believe it was an extra 5 minutes, because I'm always good about making sure we end right on time, just because the questions kept coming and the information they were providing was very helpful. If they are able to do so, and if we even have a need for that, we can certainly explore it. But another option, we will certainly get their responses in written format and include it in the transcript that you receive from the Q&A portion of today's webinar. And we will make sure that any question you submit throughout the course of today will be answered and shared with everybody. All right, so let's dive. Melissa, are you ready? Let's dive right into today's prepared topic. And the topic is wow. You know, I should just have the word wow on the screen, because so much has happened in just 2 weeks, and we really want to help you stay ahead of the workplace impact. You know, one thing that I think is really important is to take a look at what has happened. And these are just some snippets, and it certainly isn't everything, but these are snippets of things that have occurred over the course of the past 2 weeks. And I thought it would be funny to have, you know, but wait, there's more. That's the infomercial spiel that you always hear when they tell you all the great things they have to offer, but oh, just when you think it's over, there's more. Well, unfortunately, a lot of what we've been dealing with hasn't been great, but certainly we've all seen there's more. So as you see on the screen in front of you, look at all these things that have happened. You know, in Western New York, COVID cases are on the decline. However, in Northwestern Pennsylvania and Southwestern New York State, COVID cases are on the rise. There's protesting that is taking place during the pandemic. Not only protesting, but then of course there are riots, and riots have damaged businesses in Erie, Buffalo, Cleveland, and beyond, all throughout the country, of course, and throughout the world for that matter. Some of you have employees who are returning to work. Some of you are in areas where, you know, the state is reopening. However, some of you are in areas where, you know, the state is a little bit slower to reopen in your respective region. We have unemployment rates that have surprisingly declined, which I think it's right around 13%. I just read this morning. The stock market is beginning to rebound. The Senate has approved a bill extending the Paycheck Protection Program, and I could go on and on and on. But one thing that we can agree upon is that there's been a significant amount of change and not just change. Let's use the word turmoil. So Melissa, I have on the screen right here for everybody to see just about 4 pointers that I had put together in terms of what they can do. So we want to help you, those of you who are on this webinar, we want to help you figure out what you can do to reassure your employees amidst this chaos. And I think one thing we can recognize is that the chaos is probably going to keep coming for quite some time. Hopefully I'm wrong on that, but I have a sneaky suspicion I'm not. So what's really important is your ability to communicate with your employees in the face of this uncertainty. And it's a constant challenge because just when we think we know what to expect, we get another 1-2 punch from the other side, right? So, you know, Melissa, I have a few things here that I've shared with them in terms of what they can do. And the first one I said is to just take a minute and to center themselves, because when they're anxious, it's going to show in their communication. What thoughts do you have about that?
I would agree with that completely. I think that, you know, I use this analogy a lot, but it's kind of like when your toddler's learning to walk, and if they fall and look up at you, it's if you're like, ah, then they're like, ah, but if you're like, it's all right, you got this, and you support them getting back up, then they follow that lead. So I think just being able to kind of wrap your own brain around what's happening and create the space to take that in, and then model for them how to move through adversity, because it is kind of a 1-2 punch that we're all experiencing. And one thing I do know is that based on how we cope around stress in general, that is definitely amplified right now. The uncertainty and the feeling of things being so out of order causes people to cope in ways that they try to regain a sense of order. And sometimes that shows up in healthy, productive ways, and sometimes unhealthy, destructive ways. So just tuning into that for yourself so that you can be aware of what you're modeling is definitely important.
And I think, Melissa, a lot of times that we as leaders, I mean, you and I are both leaders, everyone on this entire call is in a leadership role of some sort, whether they're a business owner or nonprofit executive director or human resource professional and everything in between. You know, I think a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves. Oh, we have to act fast. We have to hurry up and say something because they're all looking at us. What do you say in response to that when we're trying to also balance taking a minute so we can just center our minds around what we want to say?
I was thinking about that, and I think in order for people to feel reassured, first of all, being transparent, I think helps people feel safe. But I also think in order to reassure your employees, they need to feel heard. So just being able to check in and hear from them does not mean you have to fix it or come up with an immediate solution. It's okay to say, you know what, I hear you, and acknowledge that. Give me an opportunity to think about that, and I'll get back to you. And then just follow through with it. But I think being able to reassure them comes with allowing them to feel heard.
That's a good point. And then another, on the flip side of that, I know we've worked with a lot of people, some of you even on this webinar who've you know, called us, emailed us on the side in between these webinars and clients, and they've said, well, gosh, I don't really want to say anything till I know exactly what I want to say. So they've almost been stuck in a state of analysis paralysis because they want to wait until they have the perfect message. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's definitely where I've been a resource for businesses. I think you don't want to overthink it. I would encourage people to go back to their mission and try to align with their values to respond. A lot of times we can trip ourselves up in trying to have that perfect response, but the reality is, if you can go back to why you're doing this in the first place and what the core values are of your organization, being able to respond within that is going to be better than trying to overthink it. And really, I think the other piece to that is just deciphering, and this is where I think I've been helpful to a lot of systems, if you will, or organizations, is being able to decipher what is that person really needing in what they're asking. Because a lot of times I find it's really beyond the words or the behavior. It really has to do more with something they're needing, and people can misfire in reacting or responding or overthinking, in really meeting the need of what it is that person's trying to communicate.
Okay. All right, good point. So now we're going to segue into the next pointer that I had included, and that is to just put yourself in their shoes. And I know this is old-fashioned advice that we've been told since we were kids, and our caregivers were teaching us how to be kind to others. But really, you know, for this, it's really important, we feel, to stop and think about what their questions are, what their concerns are, what it is that they are going to feel like they need an immediate answer to. And the quicker you can tackle what is weighing heavily on their minds, the quicker that you will be able to give them a sense of, you know, hey, this is going to be okay. It's going to be all right. We're going to get through this together. The third thing is to know what you're talking about. It's very important during a crisis to make sure that you're not conveying misinformation to the best of your ability, especially during a crisis. If you are doing that, it can be extremely destructive. And so it's important that you get the facts from credible sources first. I know a lot of you have, you know, utilized the different resources that we've provided above and beyond anything that we're doing. A lot of you have utilized, for example, people like Mark and Amanda and Melissa as a resource, and there are many resources also out there beyond the names that I just mentioned. But whatever you do, make sure you're continuing to do what you're doing right now, and that is get the information from a credible resource so that you know what you're talking about. And then the last thing that we had shared is how important it is to have specific next steps. So you want to give your employees some tangible action items. And you might be thinking to yourself, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what's coming next. Well, you have to at least come up with, you know, some potential or recommended next steps. It's important that they feel like they have, and that they know they have some sense of control so that they feel like they're contributing to a solution. So even if you don't know exactly what's next or what will come of the things that you're thinking, you can say things such as, well, here are the steps that we're taking. Here's what we're thinking. Here are some things that you can do. That empowers your employees, you know, to regain that control that Melissa just talked about earlier in a healthy way amidst all the chaos. Melissa, before we go to the next slide, what additional insights do you want to share from those 3 pointers that we had just added to the first one that we talked about already?
I would just suggest kind of what you're alluding to there, that engaging them in being part of the solution can be very empowering, as opposed to just sort of handing down what's going to happen. And it's not that there's not a time and a place that needs to be done in a leadership role, but being able to just engage them and being, you know, one of my favorite sayings is, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So really being able to engage them in those conversations. I can share just some tools that I train to, which are what I call the 3 C's of communication. Number 1, just being curious with people. You can get a lot of information rather than making assumptions or predictions. And then 2, seeking clarity. So this is what I'm hearing you asking for. Is that what you're intending to ask for? Just really getting clear on what it is their intent is and in what they're trying to communicate. And then also committing the time to close the conversation effectively so that your employee feels heard and acknowledged. And again, not because you have to have all the answers in that minute, but just acknowledging them and allowing them to feel heard and offer possible solutions. You can at least say to them, this is what I'm hearing. Let me take a moment to think about these things, and we can regroup. It gives you a chance to kind of get your feet on the ground, align with what you're needing within your organization, and then step forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And I think I want to put a little exclamation point next to that final C, and that is confirm. You know, make sure that you are closing that conversation in a way that's meaningful instead of just leaving them hanging. I think a lot of times we forget to do that. So now I want to talk a little bit about the psychological impact of dual pandemics. And what I'm talking about in terms of dual pandemics, we already knew 2 weeks ago that we had the novel, coronavirus to deal with. But right now the world is a very scary place for not only us, right, all of us on this call, but also for all of our employees and their loved ones. And what I'm talking about is the new pandemic, and I might be a little too bold to call it that, but what I'm referencing is the current social unrest and violence that has erupted since the last time we were together. So, Melissa, I would love if you could take maybe just, 2 minutes or so and just enlighten all of us and maybe even help validate some of the feelings that we have about what some of the psychological impacts are that we may be experiencing, and of course that our employees may be experiencing.
Oh, I just think it's it's on steroids and then some. It's so unsettling and unnerving, I think, for everyone to be in a place, we talk about how as a community or even as a world being unprepared for what has come with the coronavirus. And I think it just amplifies that with where we're at now with the social unrest. And so I often say, we could all fit in the book somewhere. So people will want to start finding reasons why things are happening the way that they are. And, that doesn't necessarily mean somebody has to be psychologically impaired per se, but I think you could just call it human behavior. Anytime our world is turned upside down, be it, something small or something, extremely large like we're dealing with now, it just creates such a sense of unsettlement and out of order feeling that we're seeing reactions to that uncertainty, whether it be anxiety, depression. Those are the symptoms of not being able to get our feet on the ground and have a handle on what all is to come. And so any sense of predictability or order or consistency that we can build in place for our employees is going to create a more secure, safe feeling in them walking through some part of their day. I actually was going to mention I am on an international board for collaborative professionals, and we in our January board meeting had a speaker come and train us on this concept of what's called IDEA. And I was going to suggest his book because I think it would be a great read for any business owner. His name is Dr. Shaquille Choudhury, I think is how you say his last name, Choudhury. But he presented on this concept of IDEA, which is really helping businesses or organizations wrap into their mission and values this concept of IDEA, being I for inclusion, D for diversity, E for equity, and A for accessibility. Mm-hmm. And he speaks about that in his book. His book is called Deep Diversity, Overcoming Us versus Them. So I've always been one that has thought knowledge is power. I think the more we can educate ourselves as leaders and the more we can really, again, model how we want these things to look within our organization, right, and walk through that with our employees, the more secure they're going to feel with all these moving parts that feel so out of their control.
Very well said, and a very timely read for sure. The last thing we want to touch upon, and we'll spend only about 2 minutes or so on this slide before we, turn it back over to Mark and Amanda for the Q&A portion. But, what is it that you can do to build trust in your leadership? And so we have here, 5 different things that we wanted to make sure that you as an employer, again, whether you are an owner, and we have a lot of business owners on this, whether you are an executive director in a nonprofit, we have a lot of nonprofits joining us, whether you are, asked to oversee the HR function, but you aren't necessarily a trained HR professional. Guess what? You're in a leadership role. Maybe you are a trained and credentialed HR professional. Guess what? You're in a leadership role. We want to make sure that we give you some things to think about so that you can help build trust from your frightened employees in your leadership. And the things that we want you to think about, the first is to control the controllable. That is some of the best advice that I have ever been given, and it definitely helps to ease any sense of anxiety that we might be feeling, because anxiety comes when you're trying to anticipate and react to things that haven't even necessarily taken place, and you're trying to control things that aren't as they are right in front of you today. So based on what you know today, because we all can see how quickly things change, control the controllable of what's in front of you right now. Over communicate to your employees. Don't assume because you said it once, or you sent a memo out 2 weeks ago, or you casually mentioned it, in a meeting, that they're going to remember it. Over communicate. Have that consistency in messaging. Demonstrate a genuine, authentic, and sincere empathy. I pray that everyone on this webinar is truly an empathetic person. If you are not, they're going to see it, and they're going to see it now more than they ever have. So do whatever you need to do to demonstrate and get in touch with the empathy that you feel inside. Have a plan, and then hold yourself accountable to real action on behalf of your employees and those you serve. One thing that I heard recently from a client is they were telling their employees, oh, you tell me, or I'm going to count on you to hold me accountable. You tell me if I'm doing the wrong thing. No, this is not a time for that, nor is it ever a good leadership practice to do that. You hold yourself accountable as a leader to the real action that you need to take on behalf of them. And not only on behalf of them, but on behalf of your customers, your clients. And I have here just a few things for you to think about from the perspective of being an employer. Make sure you are very intentional about recruiting from diverse pools of talent. And why am I talking about that? Because obviously the issue of diversity and the topic of diversity has always been on the forefront, but now more than ever. So what can you control? Let's think of some controllables you can control. Make sure that all of your employees have as positive of a work experience as humanly possible, and that they feel included. Make sure that you compensate those who work for you equitably. Don't wait until asked to address disparities. You know the disparities that exist. And if you don't know the disparities that exist, get on that and figure it out. Make sure that all of your supervisors, all of your managers, and certainly you as well, make sure that everyone has the right training, the right resources, the right information, and the right support so that they can effectively lead during a crisis such as what we're living now and beyond. So Melissa, we have about 60 seconds to wrap this topic. Anything else that you want to add before we transition over to Mark and Amanda?
I would just be really conscientious, now more than ever. Not that you shouldn't have been before, but how do you want to show up as a leader in your organization? Because, ones don't attract tens. So if you're having challenges with employees, or you're not attracting the type of employees you'd like, it might be time to really look at how you're showing up for them.
Right. Very good. Well, Melissa, we appreciate it very much. Thank you so much. We are going to now turn it over to Mark and Amanda, who I will introduce right now, and enjoy the rest of your day, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sure. All right. So we are now going to turn it over to Amanda and Mark. And before I do that, Amanda, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear you. Can you say something?
Hello.
Okay, yay. All right. So now we need to get Mark on the phone. Bear with me 1 second. And Mark, for some reason, it's not showing up as clearly. So just so everybody's aware, I am unmuting several people to make sure that we get to Mark. So I have unmuted many of you. So if you could please allow that to be unmuted, and talking should be permitted. Mark, can you say something? Okay. So I'm actually going to unmute everybody. So bear with me. Everybody is going to receive a notification asking you to unmute. If you could please do that for me. I believe we had to do that another time as well, and it worked out really smoothly. So bear with me. Mark, are you there? Mark? Okay. And please be patient as there's a little bit of background noise while I unmute everybody. Mark, are you there? Okay. Not sure. Mark? Okay. One more time. Mark? I have unmuted everybody who is on this call. I'm not sure why. So here's what we're going to do. We have Melissa. I will work behind the scenes to try to figure out how to unmute Mark. But while I'm doing that, Melissa and Mark, you can see all of their contact information on the screen right in front of you. And again, Mark represents the Pennsylvania perspective from employer compliance, and Amanda represents the New York State perspective. Both of them are equally credentialed to represent compliance in terms of, federal related matters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually dive right into the first question. And what I would like to do, Amanda, just so that we can try to get Mark on the line, I'm going to actually turn this question over to you to please answer for everybody. And while you're doing that, I'll work behind the scenes and get Mark situated to join us successfully. And the question is, I have an employee, and the rest of you, you can mute yourselves. So anyone but Mark and Amanda can mute yourselves again. You can do that. The question is, I have an employee who is a 50-year-old male. He isn't in terrible health, but he is a bit overweight, which puts him in a higher risk category in terms of COVID-19. As part of his job, travel is required. However, we have explicitly communicated a change in our travel policy to restrict all air travel, and we are now requiring everyone to travel by car instead due to the pandemic. This employee will be traveling to an area that is a hotbed for the coronavirus next week. They just informed me that they have booked air travel and will not be driving, despite our explicit policy change requiring no air travel. He explained that I don't need to worry about it because he will release our company from any liability if something should happen. I know it doesn't work like that, and I don't know how to handle it in terms of his blatant disregard for our policy change and travel directives. So the question in bold is, what advice do you have and what compliance-related considerations should I keep in mind? So I'm sorry, Amanda, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm sure we've all encountered an employee who has violated our policies before. However, this example shows quite a blatant one. I do have concerns about allowing this individual to continue to travel by air when it does violate our policy. Unless, of course, there is a reason they need some type of ADA or human rights law accommodation. For example, if he can't drive for 12 hours at a time because of his back and we determine the air travel is appropriate as an accommodation, that would be an appropriate exception to our policy. However, just his pure preference to travel by air as opposed to driving is not an appropriate reason that we would vary from our policy. So as many of you know, as we're starting to reopen in New York State and throughout the state, almost all of New York State is in phase 1 or phase 2. And then hopefully New York City will begin phase 1 on June 8th. When we start to reopen our businesses, we are filing and we're affirming with the state of New York that we have certain policies and written policies in place and that we're going to abide by them. So it's good that this employer has a policy in place, but now we just have to follow up on making sure we abide by it. And we would want that because, our employees tend to talk with one another. And if one person gets to violate it or doesn't have to abide by it after specifically knowing about it, you're going to have multiple people that start to violate different portions of your policy. I'm also going to note that in New York, which is, as many of you know, quite a litigious state, Our Attorney General has been taking out advertisements, basically asking for people to put in anonymous complaints about their employers, whether they think that their employer is not providing appropriate PPE or cleaning procedures or whatever, following their own policies. You know, our Attorney General is allowing people to put in complaints, which are being investigated and monitored by the AG's office and the Department of Labor. So again, maybe this is one small time issue. It's just, you know, when you start getting contacted by the DOL and the AG's office, I've had a lot of clients, you know, take a really hard look at, well, we've been following our policy. I say, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that one of your employees can't blow you in and file a complaint. So just to head that off, I would, you know, that's my long-winded way of saying, I would tell this employee, no, you can't travel by air.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Mark, are you on successfully? I don't know why this is happening. I do apologize. I am not quite sure why this is happening.
Right.
Okay, are you there, Mark? All right, we will continue working on this behind the scenes, but we're going to go on to question 2. And Amanda, question 2 is, I have a 60-plus-year-old male part-time employee who is not in the best of health. He has an underlying medical condition which requires him to stay out of the public due to COVID-19. His doctor has provided a medical note restricting him from performing any on-site work, which we are happy to honor. This employee works part-time after having just retired about a year ago. He has been on unemployment throughout this pandemic. We just contacted him to let him know that we need him to return to work and gave him the good news that he can perform his job entirely from home. We will set him up with a computer in order for him to do that. However, he said he will not return to work even if it is from home and will continue to collect unemployment instead. The reason he has given is that he won't allow anything in his home from outside, such as a computer we would provide him. He said it could still contain the virus. How can I handle this situation? We need him to work and he is refusing. What compliance issues should I keep in mind?
So in this example, it is excellent that the employer is willing to grant this person the ability to remote work or telecommute. And it's even better that you're providing the equipment to allow him to do that. So that you're clearly engaging in the process of giving him a reasonable accommodation based on perhaps his susceptibility to COVID. However, his response under the ADA and the HRL would not be a reasonable request, saying that he can't take a computer because it may contain the virus. I mean, that's just, that seems very tenuous at best. That would be akin to him saying, well, he can't go to the grocery store and have, you know, go get any food, bring it back either, because that would be outside of his house and might have the virus. So in this situation, we've received some federal guidance saying that you can notify the Department of Labor that you've offered him his job back and you've allowed him to telecommute and all of these other things, and that he's refusing to work, at which point his benefits would be terminated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I had a feeling that would be your answer, and it's probably not the answer the employee wants to hear, but I see it similarly. So I'm glad that you said that.
Yes, and you may need to even preview it with the employee. You know, we've had a couple people who just didn't want to come back because they were making a decent amount on unemployment, and we explained that, listen, you know, we have the work for you. We want you to come here because, you know, you invest a lot in onboarding and training your employees. You don't necessarily want to go find someone new. But, you know, if there's that job that's there and they're able to do it, and in this case, telecommute, there's no reason this person should continue on to collect unemployment.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Very good. And this question, you know, is something that we definitely want to hear from Mark as well for this. So I will continue trying to figure out the technical glitch. But this individual wanted to hear from both you and Mark specifically. So obviously, Amanda, we will let you kick this off. But the question is, it has been on my radar to define a policy on vacations now that summer is approaching. Do either of you, Mark and Amanda, have any reference points for this? We have employees in both New York State and Pennsylvania, so I'd like to hear from each of you. It was easier to manage these things when both states were under stay-at-home order, but now each state is at different phases, and even within each state, it is inconsistent since parts of each state are at different phases. I'm thinking that air travel would maybe incur a quarantine, but driving would not. The destination should probably play a part also, and the accommodations, such as if they stay with friends versus a hotel or resort, Airbnb, etc. We have an employee who has alerted us to an upcoming vacation to Fort Lauderdale, and they are staying at a resort for a week. I think they're driving. But we told him that he would need to quarantine upon his return home from vacation because of the resort. Are we able to require this of our employees? What would you recommend in terms of vacation travel amidst this pandemic? Any guidance is appreciated.
So this is a very important question as everybody is starting to open back up and people are actually being able to go on vacation again. What we've been recommending, and this is happening with everyone, right? Banks that have branches in New York and Pennsylvania and in factories in different states, we're recommending that people focus on the destination and basically have a policy in place saying, advising against personal travel to places where the CDC considers to be hotspots. Again, prohibiting work-related travel to those hotspots unless you deem it necessary, but advising that your employees shouldn't personally travel. Require that they report that if they're going to travel to those locations in advance, and then require that upon return that they must self-quarantine for 14 days. I don't think it's necessarily for the airplanes or driving. I tend to focus on the location that they will be going at because it's going to be so much, as this question indicates, who are they talking to, where are they staying? I mean, then we really start getting down into the weeds. So I just think an overall policy of requiring them to tell us where they're going and requiring them to quarantine, which you can do. You can require them, that you can determine who comes into your workplace and who doesn't.
So let me see. Mark is still trying to join us, and I know this person really, really wanted to hear from Mark. I think we may have finally had success with this, so just give me a second, please. Okay, he's on the phone. Okay, so 1 minute, everybody. I'm unmuting all of you because I'm not easily able to see Mark. Mark, if you could just keep saying like test, 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 so that I know. Mark, are you there?
1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yay, Mark! Everybody do a round of applause for Mark, and some of your microphones are still unmuted, so he'll hear.
No. Hold on. Let me get right to it. So in number 2, can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so in number 2, what's important to know is that in Pennsylvania, they recently came out with Form UC 1921W, UC 1921W, which is the form by which, with which employers are supposed to notify the UC system that someone is refusing work. That's a new form, and it's made, I'm sure will be around indefinitely, but it's for this kind of a situation where an employee refuses to work without any reason. As we previously discussed, this virus is only viral for 12 hours. To play it safe, call it 24 hours. So obviously, refusing to use a computer that may have COVID on it is not supported by anything, and would almost certainly, I'll say certainly in Pennsylvania, result in his loss of UC. When that happens, he'll probably come back to work since that's probably his real motivation. As far as the third question regarding travel, there's definitely a wide range of opinion, and I would remind everybody that the April 8th CDC guidance says that if somebody spends the weekend with a COVID-19 positive person in a romantic embrace, the CDC says they can come back to work Monday as long as they wear their PPE and are asymptomatic. So I think there's a wide range, and I respect everybody's opinion, but I think there's way more conservatism on that front than the CDC would suggest, or any of the realities of the health situation would suggest. Also, I'll note that in Erie, for example, at 54th and Peach, there's a Rite Aid, which will test employees for free for COVID if they either have symptoms, which they normally would not in this situation, but in the event that it's required for them to go back to work, they'll test them. They'll have the result within 24 hours, and then they can go back to work, obviating the need for any kind of a quarantine. And so, again, you know, it's easy to say, you know, let's have people stay out for a week or 2 weeks or what have you, but good luck trying to implement that and having your businesses still run. And it's way, way more than is recommended by the CDC.
Okay. Well, I have an add-on question for both, you know, Amanda and Mark to that question that you both just answered, number 3. If you do require them to quarantine when they return from their vacation, I'm assuming you can make them, well, they want to know, can you make them use their PTO? And if they don't have PTO, can it be unpaid?
Well, this is Mark, of course. In Pennsylvania, you can make people use PTO whenever you want. I don't know what the answer would be in New York. I wouldn't be surprised if it's different. Here, if you get a doctor to validate your idea that they should quarantine, and some doctors will validate most anything, so I don't know how you're going to do on that request. But if you get a doctor to validate the recommendation that they be off, again, even though it's not supported by CDC guidelines, then in that case, it would be FFCRA leave, for which you could get a tax credit. Absent that, you could require it to be unpaid. Again, good luck on the engagement morale side. Or you could require them to use their PTA unless you've adopted a policy prohibiting yourself from doing so. Most employers wouldn't have done so except by accident. That's PA.
Okay. Amanda.
Yeah, so in New York, yes, you could require them to use the PTO. I agree that there's going to be problems with enforcing this type of policy because sometimes you'll just have employees that just won't tell you where they're going because they don't want to be stuck at home for 2 more weeks and use up all their PTO. However, in New York, if you are going to tell someone to stay home, I just want everyone to be wary of the fact that in New York, it's very easy to get an order, a Department of Health order from your local health department about self-quarantining, which would then qualify them for certain benefits under New York Paid Sick Leave Act. I hate to say it, it's incredibly easy to get. And then they would qualify for the benefits under that statute as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. So question number 4. We have an employee who is being advised to self-isolate while their son is awaiting test results for COVID-19. However, we are the ones advising this, not their doctor. Is this employee still able to receive sick pay under FFCRA or any other benefit, or should we have them use their PTO time? And I would love to hear both of you, because I know, obviously, we have PA and New York employers represented on this call.
I think there's a lot of overlap between this and the prior question, and so I don't have too much to add except to say that if waiting for test results is recommended only by an employer, that does not satisfy the requirements for FFCRA, but it sounds, if I understood Amanda correctly, like it's not that difficult to get a recommendation from a higher authority, if I heard her correctly. And in PA, I don't know, the authorities aren't ready, willing, and able to recommend that to my knowledge, but a lot of doctors probably would. Amanda?
Yeah, so in New York, if someone is out on anything related to COVID-19, basically, and I really hate to say this, but if you go on like the Erie County, New York Department of Health website, you can see these basic like self-certifications that they can like check boxes and self-certify, and it counts as an order, which is exactly what New York State said shouldn't happen at the beginning, but now is happening if people can find the form. So they would technically qualify if they can get that order in New York State. Just having a doctor in New York State or waiting test results doesn't qualify for New York paid sick leave unless you have some type of order. Also, if the son has an order, which again, you can get one of those basically self-affirming orders, then the person may be entitled to New York PFL as well.
Okay. All right, very good. Next question. I have a question regarding employees who can't wear a face covering due to a health condition. This is someone in an office who would only need to wear the mask when traveling outside of their cubicle or office. It's not a respirator that would require fit testing, just a simple cloth or non-medical mask. Questions are, can we require a doctor's note to prove that a health condition exists? And how do we explain to others why this employee isn't required to wear the mask without disclosing that they have a health condition? Mark,
you want that? Okay, fine, sure. So again, Pennsylvania, there really is not a cubicle exception to the mask wearing requirement. I also want to reemphasize that red, yellow, or green does not have any implications for whether masks are required. I'm aware that in green areas, if you go to Walmart in green areas, they don't have patrons wearing masks. That's inconsistent with the governor's guidance. The governor and his Secretary of Health created great confusion on that during a press conference on May 27th, in which they said mask wearing was up to the retail establishment, which it's not. That was inaccurate. Their own orders say that it continues to be a requirement, but they created that confusion. In any event, though, we need to be thinking the distinction between retail versus employees. In other words, their question suggested that retail establishments may not require, are not required to have masks worn by customers, but it does, which is wrong. It's inconsistent with their own orders, but widespread. But it's a separate question as to whether or not employees have to continue wearing masks. And if you review all the right guidance, you'll see that the mask requirement persists regardless of the color that you're in for employees. There's also not a cubicle exception. There is an office exception. And as far as how do we communicate that a particular person not wearing a mask is legit? You just basically use code words for it to say that the orders allow us to relieve employees of mask requirements under certain circumstances, which, by the way, include vision, safety, disability. So just because they're not wearing it and you point to the order as being your authority for allowing the non-wearing of it, doesn't necessarily disclose the disability. And frankly, if they infer that it is related to a disability, I don't know what else you can do about that. I wouldn't sweat it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Amanda, anything to add?
Yeah, so there's some equal confusion in New York as well. So we have some executive orders out there saying that employers need to make their employees wear face masks unless if they cannot medically tolerate it. So, and then there's also orders out there saying everyone in public, if you can't social distance, meaning if you're within 6 feet of each other, or if you're on public transportation or whatever, you also have to wear a face mask unless you cannot medically tolerate it. So after those orders came out, our Department of Health issued additional guidance regarding, okay, well, what about medical tolerating? Like, what does that mean? Because normally, as employers, we'd say, if someone said, oh, I can't do that because I have a medical condition, we say, okay, just go get certification or a note from your doctor and we'll be on with it. The Department of Health issued guidance on April 14th saying, no, you cannot ask for documentation of any underlying condition about why they can't wear a mask. So basically they can make it up. Maybe it's not comfortable and they don't like it, which again would not be a reason why they couldn't wear one. But anyway, so if you have an employee that says, no, I can't medically tolerate a mask, the Department of Health basically says, don't ask for any underlying reason, but you should work on alternative work arrangements for that individual. So perhaps you need to move their workstation, create a physical barrier, or provide them with different PPE, like a face shield as opposed to a mask. So that's going to be done on a case-by-case basis. I think the whole thing's kind of ridiculous. I might have a normal conversation with this person saying, listen, our policy is if you're sitting at your desk, you don't need to wear one because you're not within 6 feet of anybody. So is it okay then? What is really getting to the issue? I haven't really seen a lot of people saying that they can't medically tolerate, but I do expect 1 or 2 people that are just don't want to wear one.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a safe assumption for sure. All right, the final question that was pre-submitted. We work in a medical environment and have employees who perform medical-related procedures on donors. Some of the donors are refusing to wear face masks due to their religious beliefs, and specifically they're Amish. In fact, they don't even recognize the state government officials or related laws as being applicable to them. Their communities have their own set of rules that they follow. We rely upon these donors heavily because they turn out in large numbers to help us with our medical-related donation drives. What suggestions and legal considerations can you share with us as we weigh the risk of allowing them to continue donating mask-free and interacting with our employees who must be in close range with them during the donation process? And this impacts employees, again, both in New York and Pennsylvania. Amanda, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I'm very aware of the Amish community, having grown up right next door to it in country on a farm. So I am very aware that they have a different set of understanding and beliefs of what laws and regulations apply to them, even if it is an incorrect understanding. Assuming for the purpose of this example that it is a closely held religious belief that they can't wear a face mask, because we're not going to get into what is a closely held belief. New York has an executive order out there saying that businesses can use their discretion in refusing services to people, non-employees, that don't wear face masks. In this situation, I would say, let's look at the issue. Okay, so the reason they're not wearing it is because they're claiming a constitutional right to freedom of religion. Okay, I think that's a legitimate issue. So, especially since you need these individuals for the business is what I'm understanding from this question.
Mm-hmm.
What I would do in response then is talk to certain of your employees who are having the interaction with the Amish individuals in the community, and perhaps put in a set of different protocols in place when dealing with these individuals, assuming that they're not going to be wearing face masks and assuming that your employees are concerned, validly so, about interacting with people that are wearing face masks in violation of the executive order. So that might be different protocols they put in place. Maybe you give your employees more PPE. I would have a frank conversation with them about how we need these Amish individuals for our business purposes, and what can we do best to protect our employees while allowing these people to exercise their right to religious freedom.
Okay. All right. Very good. And Mark, what's your perspective on this?
Well, as we know, Amish are more typically associated with rural areas, and in northwestern Pennsylvania, the only, basically the only county that's not green is Erie, which does have some Amish, but that's probably not what the caller is focused on, Erie County. And what you'll find is that contrary to the governor's order, but consistent with his remarks at his May 27th conference, lots of businesses are interacting with customers, and I realize these are donors rather than customers, but work with me here, it's pretty close. Their customers are not wearing masks, and they're pointing to the governor's remarks as supporting that. So, it's the legal obligation of every attorney to encourage their clients, which again, this is not legal advice, but still in the spirit of that, Amanda and I are supposed to encourage compliance with all laws, regulations, and other requirements. Having said that, though, if you're in an Amish county in northwestern Pennsylvania, you're probably in a county where no one's enforcing the masks requirement, and also growing at least by the week, I'll say, if not faster than that, are the number of counties where the leaders are announcing that they're not following the governor's orders. I don't know how closely people follow that. I was just talking to a mediator from Wilkes-Barre, which has populated portions and rural portions, who told me just within a day or so, his county executive and district attorney and law enforcement representatives all said that they weren't enforcing any parts of the governor's orders. So that kind of thing is happening more and more, and whether it's announced or not, it's in fact the experience that a lot of people will have in Amish areas. So the proper short answer, and the one that I am giving seriously and as required by my license, is to comply with all orders. I'm just saying you're getting an increasingly lonely territory in doing so. But my answer is what it is, but I'm acknowledging the practical parts of that too. And again, frankly, pointing to the governor's remarks as creating the confusion for some of that. I know that sounds a little charged. I'm not trying to be provocative, but that's my best at responding to that question.
So Mark, piggybacking on that, what guidance or advice would you provide this particular employer with this question if one of their employees, God forbid, should become ill with COVID-19 and lo and behold, it's potentially traced back to this Amish, community with whom they had close interaction?
I would have them worrying even long before that happened, because this is a quickie answer on a webinar. So if this were real advice, it would be a half-an-hour conversation, and some of the things we talked about would be the fact that there's a high likelihood that if a person gets sick and needs hospitalization, which again very, very few people do, but needs hospitalization and or dies, I would expect that you'll get a very significant OSHA penalty associated with that. And pointing to the governor's press remarks is probably not going to help you with that. So there is no clear, safe path out of this, especially if you want to continue saving lives by collecting blood. There is no great answer. There's no answer that doesn't stink to that one.
Right. Yeah. No easy way for sure. Well, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate all of you who joined us today. And thank you, thank you, thank you. If you have any further questions, please contact Mark. Please contact Amanda. Please contact Melissa, or please contact either myself or Aaron Phillips. We will all be happy to help you, and we'll be sending out a transcript from today's Q&A in addition to a copy of this slide deck, in addition to all of the contact information for our guest presenters. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your week. Goodbye.